So I would say to pastors, more than pastors' wives, just be real. Have somebody in your life that you can spill to so that you have the freedom to not have that build up and then take it out on your family.
Welcome back to the Care for Pastors podcast. I'm your host, Robbie Bolden, and I'm so glad you're joining us for part 2 of this powerful conversation with Tami Jackson. In our last episode, we heard the beginnings of Tami's story, the weight of hidden trauma, the courage it took to finally tell the truth, and how years of silence impacted her marriage, her intimacy, and her relationship with Christ. But today we move deeper. In this episode, we talk about what happens after the truth comes out. What does healing really look like in a marriage that's been shaped by pain, misunderstanding, and unmet expectations? And what do you do when the patterns are already set? How do you begin to move forward? Tami shares candidly about the challenges she and her husband faced in trying to navigate accountability, leadership, and communication. She reflects on the dynamics that shaped their relationship for decades, the lessons she learned looking back, and the reality that even good marriages can carry deep struggles beneath the surface. And then everything changes. Tami takes us into one of the most difficult moments of her life, the sudden loss of her husband, and what it looked like to walk through grief while holding on to faith. Through unimaginable loss, she points us to the unwavering faithfulness of God, the importance of preparation in life and ministry, and the hope that sustains us even in our darkest moments. This conversation is honest, emotional, and deeply instructive. It's about marriage, loss, leadership, and ultimately the grace of God that meets us in every season. So lean in as we continue this journey with Tami Jackson. All of us in this audience understand that there's no perfect marriage, right?
No.
And we're all broken, and we're trying to walk, or hopefully we're trying to walk as healed from that brokenness as possible. Because the goal isn't to stay broken, it's to get healed and move forward, right?
It is.
So how would you say you guys healed and moved forward? You know, you can be as transparent as you like, and we're not going to judge Rob or you, or
I just want to be careful because I have children, and I don't want my children to listen to this and think less of what they saw than what was reality. Because I would never give my children, I never want to give my children a negative, even though they have their own negative. I don't want to add to their negative about their dad. And so I want, and they're adults, so they will listen to this, I'm sure. And so I don't want to add insult to injury, if that makes sense. But I will say, they lived in our home, so they saw, some of the things that Rob and I dealt with, probably more than I wish that they would have. Rob was a very intense person. And so that came out at times that I was not performing the way that I had committed to perform. And at first it was he was very gentle with it. But the longer that it went on, because I didn't want to do it, the more intense it became. And there were times that I would say to him, and my kids know this, if what you say in the pulpit is real, why is it not real here? That did not happen until we had been married many, many, many years. I believe there's some, I don't agree with Dr. Phil on a whole lot of things, But one thing he said that stuck with me is you teach people how to treat you. And I taught Rob how to treat me because I had the wrong definition of submission. I grew up under the old tutelage of submission. Your husband is in charge. You do what he says. You fall under his leadership. If you have a different opinion, you're allowed to give that opinion, but whatever he says goes, no matter what. And so that's how I lived the first, let's see, we were married 40 years when he went to heaven. I would say the first 30 to 35 years of our marriage.
People could look back, and you've looked back and say, man, for 35 years, it wasn't right. Is that fair?
It is fair. It is fair. But again, let me say, we still had a good marriage. There were just parts of it that were not. And I blamed myself for those, because I'm the one who said, this is what I want, and this is how it should be, and this is what I was taught. And so, yes, but it wasn't my fault. And it took me going through therapy after he died to get that.
So as a husband, as I hear what you just said, I appreciate your willingness to take ownership of it. But a pastor and a husband, and first of all, we're husbands first, right? It's our responsibility if our wife, as a good leader, is asking us to do things that are probably not healthy. It's our responsibility to lead to health.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I do.
And again, this is not to diminish Rob or put him in a bad light. He was doing the best he knew how, right?
Yeah, he was doing what he knew.
Mm-hmm.
You do what you know until you know better.
Right. And so I think one of the lessons of your life that is really compelling, that I think listeners need to hear today, is you lived in that for 35 years, and even actually longer, given the abuse and the age that you received that at. You didn't have to live there. You could have gotten, you needed help, and you didn't seek it. Looking back, what would you have changed?
Well, I would have never, ever waited so long to tell him about the abuse. I think if I would have told him about the abuse earlier, my spiritual life would have been a bit different. I don't know that, because I can't go back and relive it, but I think it would have. Because I didn't have that burden that I didn't even know I carried until, 5 years before I told him. And I think that I would have never asked to be accountable to him, ever. I don't think that. I know. I would have never asked to be accountable to him. And in that, I think that our marriage would have been different. Because I had resentment and anger for all of those years toward him, even though I'm the one who asked for it. So the confession and the lack of accountability would have made a difference. There were still things. He was very, I don't know. There's a lot of pastors, I think, who are the same, but I think pastors, like you said at the beginning of this, we have a reputation to uphold. What people see, what people hear, what people see us or assume that we are. And so because of that, we live in glass houses. And because we live in glass houses, we have to present a certain way. And so I think that was very real in our family. Instead of being who we really were, a family who loved one another, had faults, and shared those faults so that people could see you don't have to live where that is. You can overcome that. We just kept up the facade, if that makes sense. What he said from the pulpit, he lived spiritually, as far as I never saw the man not one day in my life, not one day in my whole life of knowing him, even while we were dating, which that's a whole nother story. But before we got married and then after we got married, I never saw him not one day not be in the Word. Not one day. Every day I saw him in the Word. Not just like reading it, but reading it and studying it and taking notes, aside from studying for sermons. Like, he had his own personal time, and then he had his study time. So he was very tuned in spiritually, as far as knowing the Word and preaching the Word and exegeting the Word and shepherding his flock. He was an incredible shepherd, sensitive, loving, and sometimes I would be like, you can do this with your flock, but at home, it was harder for him to do that. I won't say he didn't do it. My kids knew they were loved. I knew I was loved, but it was different than his flock. And there were times I would say to him, "Don't preach to me. I'm not your congregation. Don't preach to me. I get it." Because pastors they tend to do that. They forget that we're not their congregation as a family. But I would say that I think it would have changed the dynamics of our family if I would have told him sooner, not made myself accountable, and in not wanting to be accountable, there were things that he asked me to do that just in life, like, "Will you take this and mail it?" And I'd be like, "I'm not mailing that." So I had, it affected me in negative ways. I allowed it to affect me in negative ways. I became rebellious to him, really, because if you're not gonna do what I want you to do, or I ask you not to do anymore, like, I don't want to be accountable to you, and if you're gonna keep doing that, then I'm just gonna do what I want, kind of thing. Right. So you mentioned the last 5 years was good. Yes.
Or better.
Yes, better. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why was it?
Honestly, I think you gave up on me. I don't mean that bad.
Now, Tami, come on now.
I do, because I just refuse to get on the scale. I refuse. I will say, though, my health was important to me at that point. And so I did start doing some things on my own because I knew that's what I needed. Not because of him, but because of me. And so I think that made it better, because I was doing what I wanted to do, but also what I had asked him to keep me accountable to do. So I think that helped. I think that I think he mellowed in some things more. I think that he was like, this is, but he never said it to me, but his actions made it very evident that he had mellowed in some areas that, and so it made it, we had a great time the last 5 years of our marriage. And we were here in Florida. We've been in Florida for 10 years. We were 5 years before he passed away, which was when we were here. Right. So the last 5 years of our marriage, we lived here.
So tell me about that day that Rob passed. Because he was a young man.
Yes, I have to get my Kleenex. It's funny. It really is funny that at the end of every year, we did a budget. like, we did a budget when we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. That was another thing. I hated budgets, and he loved them. And I was responsible for keeping the budget book. Just, you can think what you want about that. But he opted out of Social Security when he became a pastor. That was an option at that point. And he, instead of paying into Social Security, he invested the money that he would have paid into Social Security, into annuities and that kind of thing. So at the end of every year, we would go over our budget, or the beginning of every year, we would go over our budget from the last year, and then we would set the new budget according to what we had, what we needed to do. And he would sit down and go over all of our annuities and all the things so that I would know, what we were doing. So he was keeping me in the loop financially so that I would know. I did the check. I did all the finances. So I think that's why he, made sure that I knew what was going on outside of just the checkbook or the Visa bill or whatever. So at the end of 19, we did the same thing. The beginning of 20, we did the same thing. No different, just exactly what we had done. But he just kept talking about it. He kept, when we'd go out on dates, he would talk about our finances and what we had and where we were. And finally, about the beginning of February, I said, okay, I get it. You don't have to tell me anymore. I understand. Can we talk about something else besides this? Well, little did I know that a month later, he would be with Jesus, and I would need to know all of the things. And I really think the Lord, I don't know if the Lord impressed on his heart to keep telling me. I don't know if he felt like something might be happening. I don't know. But that was the only year he ever did that. So I haven't said this I've said this to my counselor, and I've said it to one of my really good friends. But that that year, or January, February, I kept thinking, what would I do if Rob died? And I don't know if it was because he kept harping on the finances. I don't know. But I thought in my head, what would I do if he passed away? And I never thought that before. But it was one of the things I thought about a lot. And so he had gone on a trip to Mexico with a church member that has an orphanage over there. And he was there for like 3 days or something. And he came home, and his stomach was upset, which he had a stomach of iron because he traveled all over the world and drank the water and ate the food and never got sick. But his stomach was really upset, and he just didn't feel good. And he came on Friday, and Saturday night, he was still feeling bad. And I said, well, should we call your executive pastor and see if maybe he'll be ready to speak? And he said, no. He said, I'm going to go. I'm going to speak. And he said, we'll just leave right after, and I'll come home. I said, okay. So he spoke Sunday morning, still not feeling good. Came home Sunday afternoon, still not feeling good. So Sunday night, he called his executive pastor Sunday afternoon and said, hey, could you speak tonight? So we stayed home Sunday night. Monday, he started feeling better. Monday night, we had faith at our church, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like visitation. And so we went at the end of faith just for the reports and to, pray with them and that kind of thing. And then we came home, and then we had some friends that were visiting from South Carolina. So they were staying at a RV park. And so Tuesday morning, he said, hey, why don't you call them and see if we can go to lunch? I'll go to work, and then we'll go to lunch with them. And I homeschooled our daughter at the time. She was a senior. And he said, see if Jaden wants to go. And I said, okay. And so we called them. We went to lunch about 30 minutes from here. We all rode in the truck with our friend and his wife. And then we came home, and he said, before I go back to the office, I'm going to go play a couple of games of racquetball, which he played racquetball all the time, every lunch break almost. And then he would play in the evening sometimes if he didn't get to play because he was very healthy. He ate healthy. He, again, goes back to the discipline. He was very disciplined. And so I said, okay. So I kissed him bye and told him I loved him, and he left to go play racquetball. I said, be careful, because listen, he's had his teeth knocked out. He's had his head split open. So I said, just keep your teeth in your mouth, or something smart aleck I said to him. So he left, and probably an hour later, I was in my room putting away laundry, and I got a phone call. And it was a guy who lives his parents lived across the street from us, and he and his dad worked together. They had a home office. He was insurance or something. And he played racquetball with Rob, but he didn't play on the day that Rob was playing. He usually played on another day. But he called, and I answered. He said, hey, Miss Tammy. And I said, yeah. He said, this is Steve. And I said, hey, Steve. And he said, I think you need to come down to the courts. Something's happened with Rob. And I said, oh gosh. I said, does he need stitches? And he said, no. I said, what happened? He said, well, I think you just need to come down here. And I said, okay. I said, but you can't tell me what happened. He said, no, just head this way. And I said, okay. So Jaden was in her room, and I said to Jaden, hey, listen, my mom and my dad were here. That my parents moved in with us in 2018. My dad had dementia, and so we were their caretakers. And so I told my parents I was leaving. Something happened with Rob. I got in my car. Jaden said, can I go? And I said, no, I'll call you and let you know. I got in my car, and I knew. I don't know how I knew, but I was like, okay, he's not alive. He died. And I just kept praying all the way to the racquetball court. Well, I prayed all the way, like, Lord, let me, if he is dead, let me be a testimony to the people that I come in contact with. That was Rob's greatest desire, is that whatever we did, that we were a testimony to the Lord, and that we would honor and glorify him in our lives. And that was one of the big things of our family. And so I just prayed all the way, Lord, if he is gone, please let me be a testimony. Don't let me fall apart. Don't let me act like, I'm uncontrollable. I called my son, who lived here at the time, he and his wife. His wife was 8 months pregnant. Is that right? Yeah, 8 months pregnant. And I said, Ryan, I don't know what happened. Something happened at the courts with Dad, but they called me, and I'm on my way there. And he said, I'm coming. I said, well, don't bring Scarlett, because she's 8 months pregnant. And, he said, I won't. And I said, okay. Well, he did. He ended up bringing her, but that's another story too. So on my way to the court, Steve called back, and he said, hey, the EMS is here, and they're taking him to Brandon Hospital. So if you can just meet him at the hospital. And I said, Steve, what happened? And he said, well, just meet him at the hospital. I said, were you playing at the time? And he said, no, another guy was. I said, is he there? And he said, yes. So I said, well, put him on the phone. So he got on the phone, and I just said, hey, what happened? He said, Miss Jackson, I don't know. He said, we were playing a game. Rob went back to get a ball off the back wall, and he just laid down. And I said, what do you mean he laid down? He said, well, he just laid down, and he said, we couldn't get him up. He was out, like he passed out. And I said, oh. And he said, but EMS worked on him. They came, and they worked on him. I said, did they have to do chest compressions? And he said, yes, ma'am. He said, and they were still doing them when they left. And I was like, okay. So I got to the hospital. I followed the ambulance. Actually, they were pulling out of the racquetball club when I got there. And so I followed them to the hospital, and I pulled in like the ambulance bay, and they said, they got out, and they said, you can't park here. And I said, I can. That's my husband in there, and I can park here. And they said, the lady came over, and she said, okay. I said, she said, I went to the ambulance, and I said, I want to go in. I want to see him. And she said, no. She said, they're working on him right now, and it's really crowded in there. And I said, all right. So we stood outside the ambulance, and she started talking to me. She said, tell me about yourself. What does your husband do? Da, da, da. So I actually got to witness to her and tell her, Rob is a pastor, and he loves Jesus, and we love Jesus, and we're doing, if he is not alive, I know where he is, kind of thing. And so they brought him out of the ambulance while I was standing there, and they were still doing chest compressions, but it was very evident that he was not alive. And they took him in, and she said, let's go park your car. Give me your keys. So we went and parked the car, and on the way to park it and walk back in the hospital, I prayed out loud. I said, I'm just going to pray. So I prayed the gospel, and I prayed that the Lord would use this to honor and glorify himself. We get in there, and it was right at the beginning of COVID. He died March 10th. COVID went full blast March 13th. So they were doing the mask and the checking temperatures and all that, and we bypassed all that. She bypassed all that and took me in. I had not called anybody. Ryan said, do I call anybody? I said, no, we don't know anything. Don't call anybody. Don't call his executive pastor. Don't call anybody from the church. Don't call your sisters. Don't call anybody. So we get in, and it seemed like they wouldn't let me go back. They said, no, they're working on him. You can't go back. But as soon as they're ready for you, sit right here by the desk. As soon as they're ready for you, they'll tell the desk, and the desk will tell you where to go. So it seemed like forever that it took, but I'm sure it didn't. But in the meantime, I had called the executive pastor, and I just said, listen, I don't know what's going on, but I do think that Rob has passed away. And he said, what? And so he said, do you want me to come? I said, I don't care if you come. Honestly, you can come if you want, but my son's on his way. So as soon as I hung up the phone, the doctor and two other people came out, and they said, Miss Jackson, and I said, that's me. They said, come with us. They put me in this little room, and my son and his wife walked in at the very same time that the doctors came to get me, so we all went back. And he sat across from me, and there was two nurses or somebody, two white-coated people standing over in the corner, and he said, tell me what you know. So I told him what I knew. He said, has he had any problems before? And I said, no, he was perfectly healthy. And he said, well, we did everything that we could, but he passed away. And I said, he said he didn't make it. And I said, and I knew that. And he said, you did? And I said, yes, I did. I said, I don't know why I knew. I said, I believe that the Lord just put that on my heart so that when I got here, I would not have any expectations. And my son lost it. And so the doctor said, would you like to pray for him? And I said, no, I don't need to pray for him. He's in a much better place. I said, but I would like to pray for my family. And so, I prayed for them. And when I finished praying, the white-coated person in the corner was crying. And I was like, Lord, use this. And I still have no idea whether they were crying because it happened or because maybe the Lord used it in their life. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So he left, and he said, would you like to see him? And I said, yes. And so he said, well, they'll get him all ready, and then they'll come get you. Well, in the meantime, my friend from South Carolina had brought Jaden. And
take your time.
That was the hardest for me. When Jaden got there, I told her that Daddy was with Jesus, and she screamed the most blood-curdling scream. And rolled up in the fetal position in the chair. And my son went over and grabbed her and just held her. And I just kept saying, Jaden, it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And Daddy took really good care of us, and we're going to be okay. And when she finally settled down, she said, I can't feel my legs. And I said, well, that's normal. I said, you'll be okay. You just give yourself a minute to sit there. So, I said, we're going to be able to go back and see him if you want to. She said, no, I don't want to. And I said, well, you don't have to. It's your choice. I'm going to leave you. She was 17. So, she knew what she wanted and what she didn't. So I said, well, you don't have to, honey. You can choose what you want to do.
she said, are you going to? I said, oh yeah, I want to. And she said, okay, well, I don't want to. I said, okay. So we went back, and my friend came with her. My friends from South Carolina walked with her. And Ryan and Scarlett and I went in the room, and my friend Donna came with me. And Jean, her husband, stayed out with Jaden in the hall. But, you know, we all got to say what we wanted to say. And then we were in the hall, and I said to Jaden, you're sure? And she said, I'm sure. I said, okay. And then they just started doing all the things. He was an organ donor and all that kind of stuff. And then we came home, and I told but when we got home, I kid you not, my house was, I can't even tell you how many people were here that had already gotten the word from our church. And one daughter lived in Virginia, one daughter lived in New Mexico. And then my son was here, and Jaden, of course, was here. So my one daughter who was in New Mexico was very sick. She was septic, and she had the 2 kinds of flu and bronchitis. And I had just come home. While he was in Mexico, I was with her. So when he came home, I came home. And she had no friends there, just her boss. And so I had to call her boss, who is a man, and he had to go tell her about her dad. I didn't want her to be alone when she found out. And so he went and told her. He was Mormon. So he got to see, he got to see the reality of Christ. And my daughter's best friend went and told her in Virginia. So it was one of those things that you don't expect, but you do expect. I expected it. I don't know why, but I do believe that it was the Lord preparing my heart for what was to come.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I know that was difficult.
Oh, no, you're welcome.
It's it's emotional for me to hear you say that.
And then in the next 10 months, from Rob's death, for 10 more months, we lost my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, and my dad in 10 months. So it was all the people who completed our family.
Yeah.
Aside from my mom. And then my mom lived with me, and we were the Golden Girls. 2 of the Golden Girls.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So, Tami, looking back, what have you seen God do?
Oh, gosh. We need a whole nother podcast for that.
I understand that. But what are the 2 or 3 things that you look back on and go, man, this is who God is in this season?
Oh, his faithfulness has been, and I say this kind of, I don't know how, his faithfulness has been unbelievable. He has proven himself to me, not that he has to, but in his graciousness and his kindness, he has proven himself to me in so many ways. Financially, Rob was very responsible. So it was nothing I had to worry about. Well, am I rich? Absolutely not. Do I have to be much more careful than I was before he died? Absolutely. Do I have to go work? No. My house is paid for. So financially, he is still taking care of us. That's what I say all the time. He's still taking care of me financially because he was so responsible. I'm so grateful because I hear so many widows pastors' wives who are struggling. They have to go get a job at 60 years old because they don't have. So if I could say anything to pastors, anything, take care of your finances because you don't know what tomorrow is. And if your wife at 60 years old and all she's ever known is ministry and has no skills, which we do have skills, but
sure,
the workforce doesn't look at us as skillful. Take care of your finances. Don't do that to your wife. It breaks my heart. And when Rob and I literally had no money, we lived on support. We saved $1 a week. Then when we could, we saved $2 a week.
Literally?
Literally.
Yeah.
Yes, we put it in a savings account before we knew what annuities and all that were.
Right.
Yeah, so we did. All of our kids, when they graduated from high school, had enough money to go to college if they couldn't get scholarships. All of them have gotten scholarships, thankfully, but if they couldn't, and it was their money to do with what they want if they didn't use it for school. So I can't say it enough to pastors. Even if you feel like you don't have the money, save the money, because $1 a week. Literally, we lived on support, and we lived on my support. Rob had no support. We lived on my support, and $1 a week went into savings. And then financially, I would say that he loved our kids, and our kids knew that. I mean, he when they were in high, he never missed a sporting event. Now when they were outside of our home, obviously my son fought MMA after he was an adult, and my daughter ran marathons, and so we didn't attend those, and they were in other states as well. But my kids never once doubted that their dad loved them, and that his method might not have been right, but his heart was right. For what they did. So love your kids. And because he loved them so much, my kids and I have an incredible relationship. 2 of our children walked away from the Lord, after one while they were in our home, the other they were away from the Lord in our home in high school, but when they got out of our home, it was very evident that they were not living for the Lord. And it took a lot of work to rebuild those relationships. One of them came back sooner than the other, and my husband in that one's relationship was the sweetest relationship, because both of them worked extremely hard to build that back. So it was a precious, precious thing to watch. The other one, it took a little longer, and that was the boy, because he was very stubborn, like his dad. And so it took him a little longer, but he had 2 years here in Florida that he and his wife, to rebuild that relationship with his dad. Does he wish he had longer? Of course he does. But it was a rebuilt relationship. And so I would say our kids. And then the third thing I would say is that Rob always preached from the pulpit and lived it, that it's always for God's glory and always for our good, whatever happens. And so when he went to heaven, I was able to say and believe that God had a purpose, that it was always for his glory and always for my good, whether it felt good or not. Didn't matter, because eventually it's for my good. And I see that.
Yeah. Tami, what I hear is it wasn't perfect, but God used it. He redeemed it.
He did.
And love and hope in Christ got you through it.
Oh, I don't know how people do it without Jesus. I don't.
Yes. Amen.
I don't.
Amen.
Because I couldn't have.
Right. So as we come to the end of this, I want to ask you, is there anything that you would like for our audience to know that we haven't talked about today? And one last word.
I think the thing that resonates more with me than anything is just be real. As a pastor and wife, be real. Let people in. Don't hold them at arm's length. Obviously, there are things that you can't share as a pastor and wife, but there's a lot you can that pastors, especially I think men, because Women are body conscious. We're not going to go into a gym at the YMCA and have, open showers and all of us go in there and shower together. We're not going to do that. Men usually don't think anything about that as a rule. I'm just saying this is a generalization. But men are soul conscious. They're not going to sit around in a circle and share their deepest, darkest needs or wants or struggles or whatever. So I would say to pastors, more than pastors' wives, just be real. Have somebody in your life that you can spill to so that you have the freedom to not have that build up and then take it out on your family. Rob had accountability in his life. He did. He thought it was very important. And so be real, love your wives, and listen to them. Listen to your wife. I feel like I had opportunities to say things and I didn't take advantage of those. So as a wife, if you're a pastor's wife, don't be afraid. Just say it. Just say it. Because you'll have many more years of a fulfilling, wonderful, joyous marriage. Happy marriage, because your joy comes from Christ. So happy marriage. If you're just honest and don't make yourself accountable to your spouse, don't do it. It's not worth it.
Yes. Tami, one of the things I could say about you today is that you've been real.
Yeah.
It has not been perfect, but it's been honest. And I believe that honors God.
Don't run from the Lord.
Don't
run. Because, if I would have run and gotten angry at God because of all that has happened since Rob died, because there's been a lot. My mom did finally pass away. My daughter's fiance died. They were going to get married. He died. My daughter had open heart surgery. My oldest daughter, there's just been so many things that I could have said, what else, Lord? And sometimes I do, but I don't turn away from that. Do I take breaks? Yeah, I do. Sometimes it's just, I just gotta be alone and do nothing.
Right.
But he's always there.
Yeah.
He's always there to remind me I'm faithful. I take care of my children.
Yep.
It might not be the way I look at it. It might not be the way I want it to be, but he always takes care of me.
Yes. Tami, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share. I really appreciate it.
Yes. You've been a blessing to us. God bless you.
Thank you.
As we close out this season of the Care for Pastors podcast, we want to take a moment to simply say thank you. Thank you for listening, for leaning in, and for being willing to engage in these honest conversations about the realities of ministry life. This season has been filled with the real stories of struggle, healing, loss, and ultimately the faithfulness of God. If there's one thing we hope you take away, it's this: you're not alone. The weight you carry matters, your story matters, and your soul matters. Before we go, would you take a moment to rate and review this podcast? It may seem like a small step, but it truly helps us reach more pastors and families who need encouragement and support to persevere in ministry. If you find yourself needing support, we want to walk with you. Visit careforpastors.org to learn more about how we can help. Check out our Facebook communities. For pastors, we encourage you to check out the Pastor's Ally. For pastors' wives, the Confidant, safe places designed to provide care, connection, and encouragement. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back soon with a brand new season, bringing more encouraging stories of hope, resilience, and God's sustaining grace in the lives of pastors and ministry families. Until then, take care of your soul, because the health of your ministry starts with the health of your heart. We'll see you soon.